Hello, welcome to Melomania ChatCast. I'm Andrew Cadie, musician and producer. Every now and again I have a chat with a colleague about how they do music. This time we've got drummer Martin Douglas. No one ever talks to the drummer. Maybe we're about to find out why. Martin's from Newcastle in northeast England. He's currently best known as being the drummer for the Unthanks. Before that he was drummer in the Baghdaddies. More about that later. It didn't end too nicely. He played with Catherine Williams, Catherine Tickell. He's recorded with Peter Tickell of the Afro Celt Sound System, Northeast musical superstar Sting, and Northeast actor turned musician Jimmy Nail. He's a family man. He's recently fought serious illness, and the Unthanks are just about to release a new album, and we'll hear a bit of that before we dig in. So please, drum roll for Mr. Martin Douglas. Hey!
Hello, Andrew.
Martin.
How are you doing, Andrew? You all right?
How are you doing?
Thanks. Nice to see you. Yes, thanks for asking me on your show. Very nice to be here.
You're very welcome. It's great to have you. So I was just thinking it's good to get a drummer's perspective on things. So we'll talk about your work with the Unthanks and the upcoming album very shortly. But I just wanted to get a nice, easy, simple, but very important question in before we do. What made you want to become a drummer, and how did you go about it?
It was never really a decision that I made. It was more an accident, actually. There must have been something inside me that wanted to be a performer, because I remember when I was very, very little at primary school, the teacher had said, write an essay, or probably a story it was called at that time, a story about something that you'd like to do in your life. And I remember writing a few words about being a guitarist and being on stage and sort of being up and sort of performing in front of people. I was in the school choir. I used to be interested in singing. I was always singing in the house. But then actually, I ended up playing the drums. One day at school, I happened to be bunking off a maths lesson and wandering the school corridors, trying to make myself, scarce. And I bumped into another friend who was, I said, "Oh, what are you doing? Where are you off to?" He said, "Oh, I'm going to a drum audition for drum lessons." I thought, "Oh, right." He said, "Why don't you come along?" Okay, so I joined him, went along, and the drum teacher said, "Yes, come on, join in." We did a few rhythm tests, a kind of, can you play this kind of thing, like little things like that, and so I did these tests, and I got the top score out of the people that were going to the audition. And so that's how I started doing drum lessons, and it was literally as much of an accident as that, to be honest. But I've never looked back.
Yeah. So you actually had lessons. You had lessons from day one, then.
Yes. Started having lessons. In fact, the teacher, you might know a song called "Nelly the Elephant," and there was a version done by the Toy Dolls, which is a northeast band, and the drummer Malcolm Dick, who was the drummer on that single, he was actually the guy that was doing the drum lessons at school back in the day when we had free peripatetic drum lessons and music lessons at school.
So when you started out as a drummer, who did you have like any heroes that people you aspired to be like? Or did you just kind of play what you were given? Yeah,
I suppose the main guy was Neil Peart from Rush. My brother was into Rush, and he was 2 years older than me, my brother Simon. And as is often the way, you get your influence from your older siblings and things like that. So he used to listen to Rush, and he said, "Well, you should listen to this guy. He's absolutely brilliant." And so I used to put a pair of headphones on and play along to Rush songs from day one, pretty much. Incredibly badly, I expect. If I listened back to it now, it would be embarrassing. But very good. I was lucky, actually, because we lived in the house it was a three-story house. It had a second floor. And so for half an hour every day, the neighbours would go off downstairs. So I had half an hour every day to play my drums up in the attic and make as much noise as I wanted for half an hour. And that was all the time I had every day, half an hour. And I used to rush up there, and I used to put the headphones on and play but half an hour, and I just remember having that fire in my belly, I really want to play. I suppose, other drummers, Def Leppard, actually, weirdly enough, I was so impressed by his 3-limbed drumming. Just listen to quite a lot of rock, basically, so Tommy Aldridge, he was a hero as well. But it was always the drums I would listen to. I can't remember any of the lyrics from any of the songs that I used to listen to as a kid. It was always the drum lines. They were the important bit to me. Yeah.
What's your favourite Rush drum groove? Can you still do it? Could you give us a blast?
One of the most famous is probably from the beginning of Tom Sawyer, which is just a. That kind of thing. It's quite basic, and I remember at the time thinking, "How is he doing that so fast on the hi-hat with one hand? What's going on there?" But then also his the famous YYZ, the song with the drum solo in that started off with a. Bonkers stuff, but a lot of the Rush stuff was funny time signatures as well, and I think that's what opened my eyes up to being not just it being a straight, it doesn't have to be in 4. The music you play, it can be in any time signature. You can throw beats in there, you can take beats out, you can have fun with it. And Neil Peart was great at that. So solid as well, so accurate. I mean, he's known as the Professor, but probably still one of my favourite drummers, actually.
Yeah, it looks so effortless when you do it. I was just thinking that's a crazy, really energetic beat you're playing there, but you're just kind of sitting there as if you're checking your phone or something like that.
Economy of movement, I think it's all about.
Yeah.
My favourite drummer at the moment, I don't want to rush you on to any subjects particularly, but is a guy called Chad Wackerman, who played for Frank Zappa, who generally across the board has amazing drummers. And I was just listening to an interview with him the other day, and his drum teacher always impressed on him the importance of, the economy of movement and relaxation, and just really being relaxed when you're playing the drums. And obviously you find if you're playing a 2-hour show or something like that, if you're not relaxed, your hands start cramping up, you start feeling more tired and things like that,
like on any instrument, actually. It's the same on the fiddle. It's the same with the vocals as well. As soon as you start getting nervous or cramped up, then you start not being able to do things that you can normally do.
I think one of the drawbacks to that, unfortunately, is that because drummers are usually, or you see a great drummer and they're all over the place and they're big and they're doing everything, but. And then I've noticed, people have said to me, it's I couldn't even tell if you're actually playing the drums, because it's all down here, it's all sort of down below. And then when you're on the back of the stage, especially if you're not on a drum riser, you just see your head like this, and it's like, what is he actually playing the drums? What's happening there? I do have my drums set quite low generally. And I know, if I wanted to, I could set them up a lot higher, and then you'd have a lot more of the kind of not show off's the wrong word, but the visibility, the sort of the visual entertainment aspect of it as well.
Well, you said at the beginning that you were maybe drawn to the performance side of the thing, and then I instantly thought, well, drums is the wrong instrument in that case. It's not quite as bad as bass, but you're right at the back.
Yeah.
Out the way, you've got like the rest of the band standing in front of you, masking you probably half the time. Does that bother you if you were drawn to the performance side?
I don't think it does, no. I actually think I relish that. I think I like the fact that I'm at the back, actually, because at the end of the day, it's what... I'm not as exposed. As a drummer, you're not as exposed. And you feel a lot more
visually, you're the loudest thing in the band.
Well, there is that, yeah. There is that, but it's not all about necessarily about... It's about the music that's coming out of you rather than the visual thing. And if you're at the front, I would have to be a lot more animated and would have to be a lot more out there, and which in certain situations is great. If you're busking, for example, if you're a busking street festival or something like that, and it is all about the performance and the theatrics of the whole thing, then you do need to ramp that up a bit, and you do have to start getting more from the audience. But as a drummer, generally in most bands, I find that it suits me quite well to be to be near the back. One of the reasons I don't like drum solos, I don't like being. I don't like that sort of thing.
Good. So you've been at the back in various types of music. I was just kind of thinking about your career path. So I think you started off in a rock band, then you ended up playing with Liverpool acoustic indie singer-songwriter Catherine Williams.
Again, that wasn't a job. It was me standing in for her drummer, Alex Tustin. He took a week off in the middle of a tour because it was going to have a baby, And incredibly, right. I've never heard this happen before. He took a week off. The baby, as far as I know, actually came on the day it was due. And so I filled in that week of the tour. And then, he came back in after that. But that was my experience with Catherine Williams. And that was at the time the biggest rating tour, the highest rated tour, that was the biggest audiences, the biggest stages, the good PAs, And I mean, she's gone from strength to strength and does all sorts of things now. But
so you were playing rock music. I suppose this is the question I'm leading up to. So you started off playing rock music, which is obviously quite loud and aggressive by its nature. And Catherine Williams, very soft voice. So obviously you can't come in like a rock drummer and even if you're sitting behind, that's not going to be appreciated or fit in very well if you start really going for it. And then you were in the Baghdaddies, which is all about dancing. So I suppose that was loud and fast and very dynamic. Yeah. And now you're in the Unthanks, which is more of a kind of listening, folk-based sort of music. So is it a big adjustment for you to sort of fit in with these different kinds of bands?
Well, probably a little bit more history to fill in there. It was actually when I started learning, I used to go to Newcastle College on a Saturday morning. It was a bit of orchestral stuff, a little big band stuff, like Glenn Miller, that kind of thing as well. And then at the school as well, we had a St Cuthbert's dance band, so we used to go out and do a lot of Glenn Miller type stuff, Gay Gordons, the waltzes, the foxtrots, and the quick steps and things like that as well. And that was probably where I learned that I had to shut up a bit, and it's all about accompanying, and it's not about being at the front. And yes, you've got a very loud instrument, but you've got to be very careful how you use it. And it is an instrument as well, and it's very dynamic. So actually, when it got to the point where I was playing in the metal band, the Newcastle metal band Accelerator, because metal, proper metal, was great. And that was what actually I didn't realize before that, but there's a different ways you might hit the snare drum. For example, you can, if you hit the snare right in the middle, you get a certain sound. If you want it to be really loud, you hit the tip and the rim at the same time, and you get a much, it's a sharper kind of sound. And every snare hit for Accelerator had to be on the rim. It had to be that sort of consistent, really loud crack on the rim. And that was
that's why after metal gigs you always find shredded drumsticks.
Exactly, and the drumsticks, they end up sort of really shredded around the middle there, because I mean the top here, where you're hitting the cymbals all the time, and so you get little chunks out of them there. But then you'll see them in the middle. You'll see a big chunk missing out of there, and that's where your sticks snap when you're playing metal. They tend to snap in the middle because you're whacking that off the snare all the time. So
wow, this must be a fascinating thing for any Unthanks fans who've tuned in to see the Unthanks drummer talking about playing the drums. It's like, oh yeah, when I was playing metal, shredding sticks.
yeah. I mean, I used to end up with bleeding knuckles and things like that. Because you'd be playing all over the place, and you'd hit the knuckles on the snare drum or on a cymbal or something like that, and you'd like end up with blood on your snare drum and things like that. I mean, it's pretty metal, to be fair. It's pretty metal, but I don't think the Unthanks would be particularly happy if I went down that route for any of their gigs. But maybe one. Never say never.
No, I wanted to get onto how did you end up in the Unthanks to start with? Because I've seen the Unthanks twice, but before your time, and they didn't have a drummer. So how did that come about?
That was a Baghdaddy connection, actually. When Rachel and Adrian got married. Adrian, the pianist, producer, guy, Rachel, one of the singers, the sisters, one of her conditions to marrying Adrian, I don't know if this is a secret or not, but she said, I'll only marry you if the Baghdaddies play at our wedding. And cool. So obviously he relented and said yes. So we went up to, I think it was, where was it? It was up in Northumberland, so Otterburn it was, and we set up there.
All right.
And yeah, we played the gig. So that was the first time I met them. And I think, to be fair to them, you know, we did have a reputation. The Baghdaddies did have a sort of party band reputation, or a party people reputation. And so when I did the first gig with them, I'd been to a couple of rehearsals, and I think that there was still a bit of checking me out going on, you know, just to make sure I wasn't going to, like, you know, tear the venue down or anything like that. And I think they found out, actually, I'm quite nice, actually, you know. We all have our moments, but that was okay. And actually, the first project was 2012. It was to do with the Olympics in the UK Olympics, and there was project. It was I can't remember the exact name of it, but Harbour of Songs, I think, was the name of the album that came out. But to celebrate the Olympics, a boat was built, and lots of people sent in these little knickknacks and sentimental items and things that they had stories about. And so they sent them all in, and then 12 songs were written about 12 of these items, things like wooden spoons or guitars or whatever. And in the end, all of these items were incorporated into the hull of the boat that was then sailed around the coast of the UK. And so there were 12 songs written. I think Guy Chambers wrote one of the songs, you know. So there was a few on there. I think probably at the time, then Adrian kind of thought, because he'd been playing drums on some tracks. Chris Price had been playing drums on some tracks, and I think they'd had a drummer for a little while who was also a bass player. But, you know, I mean, obviously I'm biased in these things, but having a drummer is better than having somebody who's not quite a drummer. You know, I didn't play on that many of the tracks, maybe for a 12 track gig. I'd maybe play on 4 or 5, something like that. You know, but then as time progressed, I mean, well, obviously, I mean, they're very dynamic, and their music. Sometimes it goes from just the two people singing, or it goes to an 11 piece with a trumpet, and it's, you know, dynamically vastly wide. So it's great. So the drums is just another voice in that whole mix up of instruments.
So just before we continue talking about the Unthanks and the stuff you're doing now, I'll give everyone a blast of the Baghdaddies for anyone who haven't heard what you were doing before that.
As a universe in the perfect verse, and we're laughing like the lovers do. Contain us, restrain us, we're troubadours to the core. Confound us and hound us, we are falling straight back down to the earth, into the sun.
So definitely a party band, definitely fun. And you talked about having started out playing very early on, and you're playing doing odd time signatures, and it's based on a lot of Balkan music. But that must have been a big change in dynamic for you, being on stage as well, playing these sort of big, lush arrangements rather than to a load of drunk dancing people.
Yeah. Well, it is. I mean, there's a lot of fun to be had, you know, playing. I you know, make no bones about it. The Baghdaddies is the best band I'll ever play in. Do you know what I mean? They're brilliant, absolutely, just amazing to play in with that much energy. And you know, you can see an audience just getting grabbed, you know, by the music and throwing themselves around. And I used to think, God, how do people dance this? This is so fast and so frenetic and so crazy. But people used to, you know, they rose to the challenge and they did it, you know, and sweat dripping off the ceilings at the end, the condensation dripping off the ceilings. And the best, you know, my favourite gig of all time was a Baghdaddi gig. It was actually, we were lucky enough to go to Bern a few times in Switzerland. There was a festival called Buskers Bern in Switzerland. But yeah, we were invited over there, and that was a street festival, so it was a busking festival. And you know, you basically carried all your equipment around with you. You know, I had a trolley with a tiny little drum kit set up on it, and you'd sort of turn up and set this thing up and play. But then at the end of each night, there'd be a busker house where all the artists would go, and all of the staff and all the volunteers would end up. And quite often there'd be cheap beer, or quite often free beer, you know, if you knew the barman. They invited us back for the 10th anniversary because it was, you know, they loved us and we loved them, and it was a big love-in. It was great, and this big party at the end. So we and because we've been playing, you know, you play 3 or 4 times a day, relentless. You know, it's great. It's so good for you to play that much, you know, to be gigging that much. You can practice all you want, but as soon as when you're doing gigs, that's when you really learn stuff. And I think prior to that, we'd just been to Italy, maybe to Ferrara Festival, or we'd been to another festival in Switzerland or something like that. So you'd be playing so much, and we did the gig at the end of the night, and I just. You have those few moments in your musical life where you just feel that you're absolutely at one with what's happening around you, and that you're part of your instrument, and you don't miss anything. Everything is intended, everything you go for and got. And it was that moment. And I remember in between songs, I ran round from behind the drums and I went and gave one of the organisers a hug, and I was like, "Oh, thank you so much for inviting us to this festival." And I didn't really know it at the time, I think, but that that's now. That's my favourite musical experience of all time. That one particular gig. And might have only been a couple hundred people there or whatever, but everybody was on the same wavelength and doing it. And that was a time in my life. Those festivals and the age I was and everything. And it was, I think that that was the best time I've ever had in my life. Doing those festivals and going. But musically, best time in my life. It really stands out as a good decade or so of lots and lots of fun.
That's something I can relate to, and it's a good thing to hear you say, because sometimes people who are aspiring to be a musician, or just like watching musicians and interested in music, might think the sorts of gigs that musicians enjoy the most are maybe the most prestigious ones, but like a busking festival doesn't sound like a prestigious gig. But sometimes the best musical moments can happen in those situations. Yeah. And I remember hearing Radiohead talking about their really famous headline gig on the Pyramid stage at Glastonbury Festival in '97, I think it was. Yeah. And they said it was one of the worst gigs they ever had for them. And people are still talking about it now. Yeah. Sometimes the audience can have a different... like obviously everyone was lapping up that Radiohead. They were at the zenith of their powers and everything, and it was a big moment for them. But for the audience, and it's not always. I can
totally understand. I'm also lucky enough to have played on the Pyramid stage at Glastonbury as well. So that and that to me as well, because it was Glastonbury is my favourite place on earth. I absolutely love Glastonbury. Love it. And I've been to quite a lot of places on this earth as well, but Glastonbury there's just nothing else like Glastonbury. Yeah. And so to play on that stage was, it was a dream really. The gig was great. It was with an orchestra called the Army of Generals, I believe it was. Charles Hazelwood was conducting, and I remember we came off stage and I shed a tear. It was a real lump in the throat moment. To be able to play on a stage like that. And I can see people saying, surely that must have been the high point of your career. Yes, it's funny, isn't it? I mean, I've played great venues. I played the Royal Albert Hall, which was another stunning. It's a big name. That's the thing. It's like, Royal Albert.
So who's those gigs with? Was that with the Unthanks, the Albert Hall? Or,
the Albert Hall and the Pyramid stage gigs. They were both Unthanks gigs. Probably another gig that I'm incredibly proud of was this Sting gig, but not particularly necessarily that it was with Sting. It was because and that was also the Unthanks. It was because we were playing on the Tyne, which was my home city. I love it very much, and to sort of be playing on the Tyne and to be able to see the buildings on the other side and to be just part of an event that celebrates Newcastle in that way that was another lump in the throat moment. That was great. That was. Yeah, I bet
we'll talk a bit about that more later. But I just want to go back to because there's an album coming out with the Unthanks, so I just wanted to kind of get into that for people as well. First of all, what's the album called and when's it coming out?
The album's called Sorrows Away, and it's coming out, I believe, on the 15th of this month. I think it's around about 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th. I think. So we're actually
15th of October 2022 then.
That's right, yes. Well remembered. Yes, I have to do that.
So when you get together to record, get together can mean different things these days, but when you come together as the Unthanks to record an album, is drums something that kind of gets added on later, or do you build the songs around the drums? What's the approach? And because the drums aren't always in, are they? Usually in a rock band, you put the drums down first and everyone plays to it, or everyone just plays live together and the drums are at the start and they're at the end and they're at the middle, but it's not quite the case with the Unthanks, is it?
Well, it's not really. Adrian, who writes the vast majority of the tunes and the notes for the tunes, has concept of what things he would like things to sound like. Having said that, there's definitely part of, you know, when I get in there and set the drums up, we get all the mics on, we do things, and there's no real set thing already. You know, nobody's giving me any music to play. We'll try a few different things, see what they sound like. Sometimes he'll just say, right, okay, I'm going to play this, and it'll be the bare bones of a track. It'll be like maybe the piano, and there'll be a vocal on there, and maybe a little bit of bass or guitar, but it'll be still guide at that point. You know, there'll be nothing particularly set in stone at that point. So we'll try a few different things on the drums, and he'll either say, no, don't like that, or do a bit more like this, or maybe play me a track of another band and say, well, this is the sort of feeling that I was after to get this. So, for example, on the Old News, which you played a little bit of before, there's a... Yeah. We'd been talking previously about Sufjan Stevens and the sort of Sufjan Stevens music and the drummer and what he was like, and so we ended up using hints from a couple of those songs, which is how we ended up with the that sort of rhythm, and that was born out of a lot of trial and error and going, let's do this. I think Chris, the guitarist, he was actually, well, how about doing the floor tom on the offbeat, so do that kind of idea and sort of just build it up around that. But then, you know, that's the full on rhythm, and then there's another. So during the chorus there'll be that rhythm which has got the snare in. Then in the verses, there's a very similar rhythm, but there'll be no snare, so it'll just be... So, you know, similar, but different. You know, less up front, I suppose, but sitting in the background a little bit. And then there's another part of the track where it just goes into just a straighter rhythm, and we ended up referring to it as the Fleetwood Mac beat, and actually, interestingly enough, because we were after a slightly different sound for the snare drum, so that normally the sort of quite an open sound, and I thought, well, I'll play this, so I'm just going to deaden the snare, keep the stick on the snare like that, so you end up with a kind of... It's a sort of more in the background again, you know. Because when you're playing live, it's hard to switch snares and things like that. So just to get a slightly different sound out of the snare, so I'm just hitting the snare slightly differently on that.
Playing, yeah.
But yeah, so
you're leaving the tip of the stick on the skin. Yeah. So the drum's dampened.
And then and actually at the end, there's another section which is another snare hit. There's a fill at the end. It's and that's actually the rim shot again. So that's my metal rim shot coming in handy there. But it just means I'm hitting it a lot more gently, but it's getting a lot more attack, you know, from the rim shot on that. So that's like another, just so you know, three different snare techniques in a song there. But I like playing that one. That's a great tune to play. That.
So if someone watching was thinking of incorporating drums into a folk band, which is, you know, Unthanks aren't necessarily a sort of obvious folk band, but it's based on folk music and it's very acoustic based. What advice would you give either a band trying to incorporate a drummer or a drummer who's about to join a folk band?
I would say that you have to look at it from more than one angle. I would say you have to look at the song and find out whether the drums are accompanying, whether they're embellishing whether they're driving, what the song needs really. Because there'll be a few, there's a couple of Unthanks tunes on Mount the Air, for example. There's it's all brushes. The whole lot's brushes. A couple of simple swells, but the whole lot's brushes, and the rhythm. A lot of the tune is just that, that just provides, because with a 10-piece band you need something. We haven't got a conductor, so you need something to hang the rhythm on. You need something like that. But yeah, certainly in terms of that song, in terms of Mount the Air, it starts off very quietly like this, and then it builds. There's a little jazzy section because we've got the trumpet solo in there as well. Lizzie Jones on the old trumpet there, and at that point, the sort of it goes to a bit more brushes on there. But then I don't play the brushes really. It's not an orthodox way of playing the brushes. There's not this kind of, it's not there's the sort of swooshy thing. I'm using them like sticks, but it's just so I can lay into the drums a bit more. I can get more intent on the drums, but still keep the volume back on that. And then at the end, so it's like I'll play it. So the piano, the piano comes in, the trumpet solo. So it's quite quiet. It's all quite background because I've got to be behind the trumpet. But at the same time, I think that's probably one of the bits of the song where I've got a bit more free reign to do something. A lot of the Unthanks stuff is like, right, well, this is what you played on the record, so I'm trying to reproduce that as closely as I can. Within certain boundaries, but that's a little bit freer. And then at the end, I'm still using the brushes, but it's quite a tribal kind of. I've never seen anybody do this before. I've never looked that closely, but I'm hitting the drums with this bit here, or the sort of the solid stick bit on the end. Really giving it some at the end. And I think that's probably the point of the set and the point of that song, that I'll be the most animated. I'll really be whacking things hard because I can get away with it because it's not sticks. If I was whacking sticks like that, everybody it would be just too much. But so that again, dynamically, that's really from the barest tickle on a cymbal to really wellying stuff. So that's all the bit I was talking about how to accompany a song is. Definitely the end. It's definitely driven by drums, so the drums have to be right up there, and they're big at the end. And then, but a lot of the time, it's just little embellishments here and there, and just listening out for what's happening, and embellishing. Embellishing is a good word, I suppose.
So it's kind of almost like sound design more than playing a beat.
I suppose it is, yeah. Well, in that sense, it's quite classical. The composition of the songs is quite classical.
So you ended up. I just saw this from Facebook, so I thought, all right, Martin's playing a bit with the Unthanks as well and doing some really cool gigs. And I saw the pyramid stage thing. That's like if you grow up in the UK, every musician's dream is to play on that stage. Yeah. And then suddenly, there was a where you lost your place in the Baghdaddies. I don't know if you mind talking about this, but this was like a big in the Newcastle music scene. This was like what's happened.
Well, I mean, to be fair, it did take me by surprise a bit as well. To be honest, and being, I can only talk about it from my point of view. So I don't really know, and I think I was possibly sheltered from what other people might have heard about it, because when when that was over. You know, I didn't really get a chance to chat to them very much about it, and it's all in the past now. It's, you know, it's all right. But I mean, at the time it did affect me quite a lot. You know, it's almost, you know, have a very close relationship with people when you're in a band, and then for that relationship to suddenly be over like that, you know, it was a bit like, well, it was a relationship being over, you know, and then not really finding out, or not knowing what it was that I was coming to terms with, or what has happened really.
Yeah.
I'm sure if I wanted to,
was that the reason? I mean, there's a funny thing with bands. So traditionally, maybe in the 70s and 80s, a band was like a tribe, and you were in one band. And well, that's the way it looked to me. I mean, I wasn't old enough to be in a band around that time, but a band was a tribe. You were in one band, and you could only be in that band, and maybe that's why there was such a tight relationship. And these days, musicians are kind of more free flowing, and they'll do a project here and have a side project, and play with other bands and guest in each other's bands, and that. Was that the problem, that they didn't ooperaate on that more modern mindset?
It's definitely going to be a factor, because we did a lot of gigs. You know, we gigged most weekends, and we were away quite a lot. And so it was very intense for a long time, for a number of years. You know, we played an awful lot together. And I think I felt we were getting to the stage where the little bit of leeway might have been possible, you know. I think because there were certain months of the year where we didn't really work as much as the other months of the year, so it was like, okay, well, you know, if we want to do a bit of this, that, and the other, that's fine. But I suspect that maybe it could easily have been that they decided just to not wait and see whether I would end up being too busy and not have time to do the Baghdaddies anymore. They just went, right, okay, well, let's just stop it now, get another drummer, so there's no uncertainty, there's no like, what's going to happen here, because I'd said, well, you know, I've got a couple of months of gigs now, I've got a couple of months of gigs at the end of the year, and they got a friend in on drums, Nick Leviani, lovely guy, smashing guy, and it was like, well, absolutely fine, you know, because obviously I can't do the gig, they're going to need a drummer, that's absolutely fine, but then they ended up keeping him, and like, you know, I can see in terms of stability and how things work out that would be fine. But I think just as far as everybody's concerned, I just don't think it happened in the right way. You know, I think I even think, you know, that they would probably say the same. You know, that there were better ways of it happening, and it was all a bit abrupt and all a bit probably traumatic for both sides. To be fair, you know, I don't because it's like a breakup, isn't it? You know.
Funnily enough, hearing you describe it, I didn't hear any insider knowledge from anybody. I just saw the announcement on Facebook from the Baghdaddies side and from the Unthanks side, and just thought, oh dear, that's really bad. But hearing you talk about it now, it kind of makes sense from both sides as well. So they've obviously thought, he's now started playing with a band that's obviously going to be doing a lot more in the future, and I do know that feeling also of wanting to be available to go, oh, let's go and do that gig that's come up, and not have to ring round everyone all the time as well, which is kind of an issue. Yeah. So it is a balancing act, isn't it? Being in a band and trying to get everyone together at the same place at the same time, and all the travel and everything like that. So I mean, it's
very hard.
Understand that.
Yeah, very hard to find a band like the Baghdaddies who had five. Well, who still have, you know, all the members very committed to that lifestyle and to that way of doing things, you know, because being away so much, it is a big commitment. It's you miss your family a lot, you know, you miss your social life pretty much becomes the band and the gigs and the whatever you're doing with that lot. The family thing was always fine. That was always okay, because it was always said, you know, my relationship, Jane Lancaster, you know, my war lass, like she's, you know, she always understood that was the score. And to be fair, you know, I'm away less now, and the kids have grown up a bit, and I'm glad. I don't think I could still be doing that now, and that's the way to make a living out of music. You either don't make quite enough and do something on the side like teaching or this, that, and the other, or you play in a band like the Baghdaddies who gig relentlessly, and you earn, you know, you earn a better I'm out of money, you know.
You mentioned before that, you know, you're from Newcastle and you're proud of the area, and you mentioned the gig that you did with Sting.
Yeah.
You've also worked with Catherine Tickell and Jimmy Nail. They're all sort of Geordie icons in various different ways. So, what do you? Well, I did want to ask you anyway. Do you think the way you play music is affected by the area you're from? Because that's in folk music, that's a very common thing, that people almost define themselves by where they come from. But in rock music, or other types of music, is often less so. And with drums, is there like a Newcastle style of drumming like there is for the fiddle?
Not that I'm aware of. There might well be. But I know. I first got into. I don't have a long relationship with folk, to be fair. But my first brush with folk really was when I think it was Julian Batten gave me a ring. I think it was when the folk music course started at the Sage, and I don't think there were a few people on the course who wanted to have drummer in songs and things like that. And so I think Julian Batten rang me and said, "Oh, can you maybe come and do some music with a couple of the bands?" And there was a band called The Breaks, and we did a few gigs with them and the Peter Kelly. You know, there was that was like the all-star band. That was great. That.
Yeah. Well, do you remember? I did a gig. I was in that band briefly.
I think
playing the trumpet of all things.
Right? Was it trumpet?
We played
right?
Sunderland Kite. Yeah. Sunderland Kite Festival was the gig we ended up doing together.
That's right. Wow. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a blast from the past.
And Katie Doherty, who was the previous person I did this podcast with. She was singing at that. So that's the connection.
Yeah. And funnily enough, I actually saw Katie in the supermarket this afternoon, but I didn't get a chance to say hello. She was at the checkout and I was going the other way. So I was like,
wow.
So there you go. Hi, Katie, if you're watching, by the way. Yeah. Small world. So that was the thing. But the question about Newcastle style, I mean, no, I felt like I was probably, treading on the toes of any Baran players who might have been, up for the job or whatever. But no, as far as drums went, and like I say, that was my intro to folk music, and then playing with the Unthanks later on. That was when I first started listening to a lot of folk music. I mean, I was obviously aware of it. My dad used to sing the Lambton Worm to us as kids, and other Geordie tunes and stuff like that. And so the stuff that you hear, and you sort of, it's osmosis. It all goes in there, but you would never hear it with drums on. Just be a few people singing or a couple of fiddles or whatever like that. So a lot of the time, when I've been playing drums on people's folk music, it probably does come from a tradition of the rock music that I used to listen to. Like there was the Catherine Tickell track that you play, the Waters of Tyne. That's very definitely just pretty much straight half-time rock beat going through that. There was what was it, the Cartographer's song that you played before, the Ploughman's, what was it?
All right, I haven't actually played that yet. Let's have a quick listen in then.
Oh no, I had a sneak
Here's
preview
the Catherine
before.
Tickell track.
Oh, bring me the boatman, I'll give any money, and you for your troubles rewarded.
Yeah, so that's like very well-known Tyneside folk song, Water of Tyne, that he did on the Catherine Tickell and Friends album. That beat could be at home on a Bryan Adams.
Yeah, exactly.
Which obviously at the time that song came about, probably nobody had heard that kind of thing before. And that's the kind of exciting thing about just taking, that's probably exactly what people imagine when they ask a drummer to come and play on folk music. It's to bring that tradition in as well. Yeah. All right, the Ploughman Lads.
That's the one, Ploughman's Lads.
By Rachel McShane.
Down yonder glen, there's a ploughman lad, and some summer day he'll be all my own, singing laddie high and sing laddie.
that what you're doing there on that track isn't really changing the beat or the feel of how they would be playing that anyway. You're kind of following them in a way.
Pretty much.
That's what it sounds anyway.
If I remember, I was playing that on brushes, and you know when a guitarist's playing the accents that you'd have where you had dun, so it's like Just it's enhancing the rhythm a bit, you know. So it's not. It could have been.
It's more like what a Bowron player would do.
Yeah. It could have been a lot straighter. It could have been even crazier. But I think because Ian Stevenson, that was up at Ian Stevenson's studio up near Rothbury, and again, pretty much, you know, whenever you're recording drums for anybody, you'll try a few things out, give it a go. Will that work? Will that work? No, try this, and then that was the thing that stuck, and that worked. So. Yeah. I love that song, actually.
Sits really nicely in the sound. Yeah, it's a very, very, very nice song. So we kind of keep starting to talk about this gig with Sting. I'm on the edge of my seat. How did that come about? And what was it like to... Sting has for a long, long time been associated with Vinnie Colaiuta on the drums.
God, I know. How scary is that, right? You know,
I know.
Vinnie Colaiuta's my...
Stuart Copeland before that.
Yeah, I mean, Vinnie Colaiuta's my favourite drummer. And so... to have to follow that act in a way, you know, when you know in the back of his mind Sting's going, oh, it's not Vinnie Colaiuta, is it? You know. In fact, there was a moment on that gig where we sort of did the first sound check, and there was a point where the guy, because I'm listening to the sound engineer's on the other side of the river, he's like 200 yards away on the other side of the river, and he said, I could just run down the toms there, and so I was like, oh yeah, you know, to this thing, and I just remember seeing Sting go, oh, like that, and he must have been respecting any drums in his thing, and you know, so one of those moments to think back to, going, oh God, that drum fill was crap, and Sting heard the drum fill, and he thinks I'm crap, you know, just the weird stuff that goes on in your mind, you know, it's weird. But I must say, for the rehearsal,
what was it like to work with someone who you kind of, you know, I don't know what the guy's like, but. He's just a guy, isn't he? But,
lovely.
But when you approach someone who's that famous, what's the feeling? You know, and you're stepping into Vinnie Colaiuta's shoes in a way, in your head at least.
In a way, so yeah. Well,
what's that like?
I mean, it was interesting because the rehearsal we rehearsed at the stage in the Catherine Shear's hall, I think it was, in the middle. Everything was already set up when we got there. The drums were there, all the in-ear monitors, everything. There was hundreds of technicians all over the place. Everybody. And then, you know, when Sting comes in, it was like, oh God, it's like the headmaster's come in, you know. So all right, but actually, perfectly lovely bloke, and it was lovely because we were only doing, I was only doing that one song, and we rehearsed it and we rehearsed it and we rehearsed it. We played it like 6 times or something, you know. So quite a lot of the time you do a gig, and you've rehearsed something a couple of times, and you get to do it live, and you go, oh my God, I don't really know this, and you're just a little bit unsure about it, but we played it so many times, everybody was dead comfortable with it, so it was nice, you know, it was a nice experience. And you know, fair enough, he comes in, he's got a lot of people relying on him, looking at him, doing all this sort of thing, and perfectly lovely bloke, you know. It was like if you go to anybody's place of work and the boss is there and they tell you how to do things and they tell you how I want it done, and it's just, you know, professional. There was a moment during the gig, or when backstage, and Mark Knopfler actually was there, and you know, so we're in the room and Mark Knopfler's there. Oh God, Mark Knopfler's over there, and then Sting came in, and they sort of clocked each other, and they went, all right, they just went off and had a chat, and it was like, oh, that's really nice, you know, because they've probably known each other for years. You know, they're both from the same area.
Yeah.
They did.
Well, they were both on Microwave Oven song. I used to love that when I was little.
That's true, yeah. The Microwave Oven song.
On the Dire Straits track, you know.
Yeah. But that was also the
MTV. Yeah,
that's the one. Yeah. But that Money for Nothing.
We've got Sting and Mark Knopfler catching up in the dressing room. But Jimmy Nail was there as well, the actor come country musician.
Yes, well, he the last ship, the show that the song was from that we were playing on the time was, I think it had been on Broadway.
Right. And
Jimmy Nail had been the main guy in the show. He's got a cracking voice, like he's got a really good voice. I'd only heard him do things like Crocodile Shoes before, but you know, to sort of see him just singing. But he was really lovely and really nice and quiet. He was very background, you know, he wasn't, I think, you know, he was well aware of the fact that there's some pretty high caliber stars knocking around. You know, he wasn't. It was like he was part of the rest of the band.
What about that's just reminded me of seeing press stuff about the Unthanks, that the Unthanks seems to have a lot of sort of celebrity fans as well.
Yeah.
Do they ever pop up at gigs and come and say hello?
Yeah, well, where we were played at the Palladium a few weeks ago down in the big old London there, and Martin Freeman was backstage, and he remembered my name. Wow! I was like, oh, hi Martin, it's fine. But yeah, Mackenzie Crook, he's, you know, I think they've worked together doing the Wurzel Gummidge, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Adrian Edmondson once, he came to a gig. He was one of my heroes as well.
The young ones, yeah.
Oh, hey, he's brilliant. Yeah.
Excellent.
But you know what, their music is truly great, and I'm not surprised that all these people really enjoy the music. You know, and it's great that they come out and say it as well. You know, because it helps the band get even more people to hear the music.
So I mentioned at the very beginning that you had a stint of fighting serious illness. Is that something we can talk about?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, it's literally all I did for 6 months.
I mean, obviously what were you doing when you found out, and what happened?
Well, it started off as an earache, quite a sharp pain in my ear. I was like, because it was quite close to the beginning of lockdown. Was it? No, it was a few months into lockdown. I had a sort of sharp pain in my ear. And so I rang the doctor, couldn't get an appointment, told her sore ear stuff. So she prescribed some antibiotics to me, which didn't make any difference. And I think I put my tongue out or something, and I noticed my tongue wasn't going straight. I was like, what's going on there? And I put my finger under my tongue. And as you know, everybody who's experienced finding a tumour anywhere in the body will probably have that same kind of, that feeling, oh my God, what the hell is that? And then straight away I was like, I feel it there, and I was like, how the hell didn't I notice that? It's like, you know, you could look in the mirror, you could see there was something going on there. So anyway, so I went in, and the consultant said, you've got quite a large tumour there. And he said large a few times. I was just like, don't say large, don't say large. But it was fine, you know. I mean, I knew what it was. I knew that there was a cancer there. I said, look, as long as you tell me I'm probably not going to die, I said it'll be all right. And he said, well, you're probably not going to die of this, but you'll die of something eventually. So he said, when had the biopsy? Give her the. I've never had gas before. I don't know if you've ever had gas before, but to put this thing on. And, no, it was an injection. Tell a lie. And then the last thing I remember, she's saying, what's your favourite drink? I said, I quite like Buckfast, which is a complete lie. I don't like Buckfast at all. And as I was going under, I remember she turned to somebody and said, did he say like Buckfast? And that was the last thing I remember. And then woke up. But anyway, it turned out the treatment wasn't very nice at all, really. It was 6 weeks of radiotherapy. But it was HPV virus. It wasn't because of my, you know, smoking and drinking, years and years of bodily abuse or anything like that. And I think kids these days in school, they get a vaccine for this particular kind of cancer as well. So that's great. It's strange to say it though. It's not an experience I would change. It's not something I would wish hadn't happened. Possibly in the way that it affected my family and people like that, because obviously it wasn't very easy for them.
How do you mean then? Has it given you a different perspective on life?
Well, yes, it has actually. Yeah, I mean, you know, in a lot of in a lot of senses, I was lucky. You know, it was treatable. It was curable, and a lot of cancers are treatable but not curable. And this was treatable and curable. And you know, within 6 months, it had completely gone. I've never understood before how good the NHS is, you know, to have that many people looking after you and to be looking out for you and making sure that you're going to be fine. And the response from friends and, you know, family and things like that, you know, the love and the best wishes and everything that was sent, and it's a real eye opener, you know. It's a really humbling experience actually.
very pleased that you recovered and that you're
too.
back to full health. We
Yeah.
were all very worried about you at the time. Well, thanks very much, Martin. There's one thing I haven't asked you to do yet.
Yes.
And because you play the drums, and we've got very into the drums, but you're a tabla player. Obviously, tabla is a type of drum as well, Indian classical drums. Do you want to give us a blast of that before I let you go?
Well, I might have to do a little bit of rearranging of something here. This was something I learned quite a long time ago. I actually went to India. The Prince's Trust Youth Council gave me a grant to go to India back in the day when you could get grants to do stuff like that. And I stayed with a guy in Delhi, Guruji, he was called Arun Debnath. And he sort of, was that intense thing that you hear about, getting up 5 a.m. and playing tabla for 6 hours and eating some lunch and playing tabla for another few hours and things like that. And he was very guru-ish about it all, lovely bloke who would sort of sit and chat about life and about attitudes to everything. It was a lovely experience. I'm just going to check this camera is pointing vaguely in the right direction. A little taster for you.
Fantastic.
There you are. But,
yeah. That's not. I've heard that's a really hard instrument to learn how to play properly.
Yeah, it is, and I've no idea really. I think, although to be fair, it's probably like any other instrument. If you play it for long enough, you get good at it. Although they say that it takes 3 lifetimes to learn how to play it properly, and I've probably learned intensely for about maybe 5 years. 7 years or something like that, but a lot of the muscle memory's gone, unfortunately, and don't often get the chance to get them out. And actually, the couple of Unthanks gigs, I've done that, and when they sound amazing through a massive PA, just sound incredible.
Thanks very much. Yeah, thanks for going to all the extra effort of setting up camera angles and microphones so we can have your live demonstrations.
It's like industrial light and magic in here.
Prowess.
Honestly. Yeah. No, it's great. It's been a pleasure.
Well,
Thank you very
take care
much.
of yourself.
Yeah, thanks very much.
And good luck
It's
with
been
the
lovely.
release of the Unthanks album.
Yeah.
Hope that all goes well for you, the release and the tour. And I'll see you next time I'm over in Newcastle, and we'll go for a pint.
Indeed, yes. I can actually have a beer with you this time. Yeah.
Yeah.